Did you know that Napoleon Bonaparte was not only a military genius, but also a master of political and social manipulation that stunned all of Europe? His tactics went far beyond the battlefield. He deployed cunning strategies of propaganda, diplomacy, and carefully calculated deceptions to forge an almost invincible empire. In this story, deception doesn't just mean lies or tricks. It refers to the masterstrokes, subtle maneuvers, and political craftiness that allowed him to project an image of unstoppable power. How did a young artillery officer from Corsica rise from the post-revolutionary tensions in France to seize total control of a nation desperate for leadership? What methods did he use to win over his people's hearts while simultaneously terrifying neighboring monarchies? In the next few minutes, you'll discover how Napoleon, starting from a modest background, rose above the ruins of the French Revolution to crown himself emperor. We'll explore how his military triumphs were fueled by his ever-innovative mind, always seeking to surprise the enemy and, of course, to dazzle public opinion. We'll also dive into lesser-known aspects of his public and private life that highlight deception as a key part of his global strategy. This video won't focus solely on his battlefield victories. The Egyptian campaign, his manipulation of the press, the plebiscite that legitimized his coronation, and the political deals disguised as total peace. Each chapter contains a hint of deception that Napoleon turned into a powerful weapon. Get ready to delve into the depths of a figure who, even today, remains a source of admiration and controversy. Because ultimately, Napoleon's story is an intense journey into the mind of a leader willing to reinvent an entire empire, partly thanks to his command of truth, half-truth, and mystery. Before we dive into this fascinating story, I want to remind you to subscribe to The Labyrinth of History and activate the notification bell. That way, you won't miss any of our videos about history, curiosities, and the people who changed the course of humanity. Give us a like if you're passionate about historical figures or just want to uncover the mysteries of the past. Your support helps us grow and keep bringing you high-quality content. Napoleon Bonaparte was born in Ajaccio, Corsica, on August 15, 1769, into a local noble family with fairly limited means. His real surname was Buonaparte, Italianized, but he later adapted it to sound more French, Bonaparte. It's important to remember that Corsica had only recently been annexed by France, so young Napoleon's French identity was always questioned by the more nationalist sectors of the metropole. From an early age, he showed an extraordinary inclination for mathematics, reading classical philosophy and studying military strategy. He entered military academies where he excelled in discipline and artillery skills, but was also known for his reserved and temperamental nature. He wasn't yet the charismatic Napoleon Europe would later know. However, some already noted his cunning. He would analyze every situation coldly, always thinking of how to gain an advantage. Napoleon's first great deception could be seen in how he earned the support of his superiors and revolutionary politicians in his early days, presenting himself as the promising officer France needed. It wasn't an outright lie, but rather the careful construction of an image that, in the post-revolutionary context, was utterly seductive, young, talented, patriotic, and above all, with an aura of triumph that seemed to banish the ghosts of political instability. When the French Revolution broke out in 1789, Napoleon was in the perfect position to shine. His early campaigns in Italy, 1796 and 1797, and Egypt, 1798 and 1799, showcased not only his tactical genius, but also his skill at crafting a triumphant narrative. The Egyptian campaign, for example, was an attempt to disrupt Britain's trade route to India. Although the military results were mixed, Napoleon spun it into a great scientific and cultural success. He returned to France hailed as a hero, despite having left his troops in a dire situation. Propaganda and censorship were essential pillars of his systemic deception. Napoleon ensured he controlled the narrative. He manipulated the press, building the image of a fearless leader fighting to elevate France. When he failed, he downplayed it in the media. When he succeeded, he magnified his victories. This iron grip on public opinion boosted his popularity to the point of making him a near mythical figure. To cement his image as the savior of France, Napoleon portrayed himself as the one who would bring stability. The directory that ruled the Republic was weak, and he offered security and strength. His role in the coup of 18 Brumaire, 1799, was another masterclass in managing public perception. He presented the action as a patriotic necessity to restore order. The term coup d'état might sound harsh, but Napoleon wrapped it in the rhetoric of saving the Republic. This political move catapulted him to the top. The consulate was established, and he became first consul. As first consul, Napoleon implemented sweeping reforms that modernized France. He created the Bank of France and established the Napoleonic Civil Code, one of his most enduring legacies, which laid the foundations of modern law across many parts of the world. Without a doubt, he was a visionary statesman who understood the importance of economic stability and institutional power. But at the same time, he was laying the groundwork for something bigger, consolidating his position as a lifelong leader. He organized plebiscites that, in theory, were democratic consultations, but were in practice saturated with propaganda and government control. Every time the people voted, Napoleon received overwhelming approval. This electoral game might be considered one of the most sophisticated deceptions of his political career: plebiscitary democracy as a pathway to authoritarianism. The climax of this process was his self-coronation as Emperor of the French in 1804, a shock to Europe. Pope Pius VII was invited to the ceremony at Notre Cathedral, but Napoleon placed the crown on his own head, underscoring that his power didn't come from the church, but from the people's will and his own merit. That moment was a carefully staged spectacle that captivated millions, an emperor crowning himself before the representative of Christendom, while France hailed him as the heir to the greatness of ancient Rome. With the empire established, Napoleon racked up stunning military victories: Ulm, Austerlitz, Jena, Auerstedt. European powers formed coalitions to stop him, but he always found a way to surprise them. Yet his strategic deceptions didn't stop with propaganda. He also employed battlefield tricks. He moved his troops at unprecedented speeds, staged fake attacks, and simulated retreats to lure enemies into carefully planned traps. The peak of this era was his vast propaganda machine, portraying him as the savior of the revolution, the leader who would spread Enlightenment ideals across Europe. Napoleon forged alliances and installed puppet monarchs in conquered territories, like his brother Joseph in Spain, while claiming to spread liberty and equality. In reality, it was centralized control from Paris. Was this deception? Many contemporaries thought so. Others saw it as an opportunity to modernize and dismantle feudal structures. Napoleon's ambition knew no bounds, and that ultimately led to his downfall. One of the most dramatic episodes was the 1812 Russian campaign. Convinced of his invincibility, he underestimated the vastness of Russian territory, the harsh climate, and the scorched earth tactics of the Tsar's armies. He intended to show his military genius once again, but reality hit hard. The Grand Army of around 600,000 men returned, reduced to mere tens of thousands. News of the disaster in Russia shattered his image of invincibility. The people of Europe, who once trembled at his shadow, now saw a real chance to defeat him. Moreover, Napoleon's powerful propaganda couldn't hide the magnitude of the catastrophe. His enemies seized the moment to regroup and form new coalitions. With the European powers closing in, Napoleon abdicated in 1814 and was exiled to the small island of Elba, where he held symbolic rule. But his indomitable spirit didn't surrender. Less than a year later, he escaped and returned to France in a move straight out of a movie script. Thousands of soldiers were sent to arrest him, but instead of capturing him, they joined his cause. As he advanced toward Paris, this episode confirms the fascination Napoleon inspired among troops and people alike. Another deception, turning what should have been a capture into a triumphant parade. This began the period known as the 100 Days, in which Napoleon regained power and prepared to face the European forces one last time. His charisma and powers of persuasion were still intact. But the campaign ended in the famous Battle of Waterloo, 1815, a decisive defeat that sealed his fate. After his final defeat, Napoleon was exiled to St. Helena, a remote island in the Atlantic under British rule. There he spent his last years without an army or a following, yet still controlling his own legend. He dictated memoirs and stories that reinforced his image as a tragic hero misunderstood by Europe's conservative monarchs. Even in his final exile, he managed the narrative, ensuring he would be remembered. He died on May 5, 1821. To this day, the exact cause of his death is debated, from stomach cancer to possible arsenic poisoning. But what's certain is that Napoleon left the world wrapped in an aura of mystery and enduring influence. Europe's monarchies were never the same after his reign, and the map of Europe was forever reshaped by his campaigns. The Napoleonic civil code, centralized state institutions, and the idea that one man could embody the spirit of the revolution, all of these remain part of his legacy. He used deception in all its forms to consolidate power and reinvent an empire that marked the transition from revolutionary France to Napoleonic France. Why do we say that Napoleon reinvented an entire empire through deception? Because his genius lay in understanding collective perception and shaping it to his advantage. Every military move, every diplomatic strategy, every PR campaign aimed to reinforce his authority and exceptionalism. But we can't judge him solely through the lens of lies. His government implemented reforms that modernized French administration, extended some values of the revolution, and in some ways planted the seeds of nationalism across Europe. He was both hero and tyrant, statesman and dictator. His deception consisted of fusing revolutionary legitimacy with imperial splendor, seducing soldiers and citizens with dreams of glory and prosperity, and silencing, whenever possible, any voice that could tarnish his image. Without a doubt, Napoleon remains one of history's most complex and fascinating figures. His life shows how political cunning and the control of information can be as powerful as a cannon on the battlefield. In the end, remember that what some call deception can also be seen as the most sophisticated form of diplomacy and mass influence in an era of massive social upheaval. The final balance of his figure lies in the eye of the beholder. Was Napoleon a visionary who unified continental Europe against an archaic order? Or was he an insatiable tyrant who subjugated nations with an iron will? Perhaps the answer lies somewhere in between, where hero and villain converge to give us a truly unique character. If you enjoyed this journey through the life and legacy of Napoleon Bonaparte, don't hesitate to subscribe to our channel, like this video and share it with your history-loving friends. Do you think deception is the right word to describe Napoleon's genius? Or do you think his greatness lay in his real merits and iron will? Let us know your opinion in the comments below. Your participation is key to helping this community grow and continue exploring the most fascinating events and figures of human history. Thanks for joining us, and see you in the next adventure of The Labyrinth of History.